I wasn't a private detective, yet here I was, taking on a private job for someone, a card, a friend. The news came from the chief, who told me that a young woman named Lisa had personally requested my help, claiming she trusted me more than anyone. That, and the fact that I was a cop. At first, I was skeptical about who Lisa was, but then I remembered our class representative from high school. And now, she had a job for me. More specifically, a job where I was supposed to help. She told me to meet her outside the Cove Moonlight next Sunday. For 4 days, I tried to contact her, but the only thing she ever said was, information will be given once we meet in person, and nothing illegal. Convenient time in the day I was supposed to meet Lisa happened to be the memorial day for my late grandfather. Moonlight was located just outside the cemetery, so after paying my respects to my granddad, I crossed the street and entered the Cove. I arrived at 6 p.m. Since it was evening, the place wasn't too crowded. Lisa showed up at 7. She wore a hoodie despite it being summer, which made me assume this job would take place outside at night. The fact that she chose a Cove as her meeting spot also suggested she needed caffeine, probably for a job that ran into the late hours. I figured I could spare time until midnight since my shift started at 9 a.m. We sat down, drank coffee, and talked about life until 8. That's when Lisa stood up and said she was ready to show me what the job was. I had no idea what to expect. Maybe something strength related, but where she led me was the graveyard, in the middle of the night. At that point, I was convinced this was some kind of practical joke. She stopped in front of one particular gravestone one I immediately knew was significant. It was massive, easily twice the size of the others in both height and width, adorned with intricate details. If I had to describe it briefly, I'd say it looked like a small fortress. As agreed, I was allowed to leave at midnight, but Lisa was staying until 5 a.m. Our job was simple, to watch over the large tomb. The layout of the grave was unusual. It had 3 pedestals, with a small crucifix perched on top of the tallest one, easily double my height. A fence surrounded the entire gravesite, making it stand out even more. The grave belonged to someone named Alice. No surname, no date of death, no epitaph. Just, grave of Alice. I guess she had been some kind of noblewoman who spent her final days building her own resting place. The lack of additional information made me wonder if this was actually a family mausoleum. All we have to do is watch this part of the grave, Lisa said, pointing to the back of the stone. But she wasn't pointing at just any part of the grave. There was something I didn't expect to see. A door. Not just a carving of one, an actual door, complete with a doorknob. Interesting. Maybe it was meant for family members to access the tomb. If that were the case, then this really might be a mausoleum. Of course, our job was just to watch, not to open it. Not that we could, the door was locked. As time passed, any lingering sense of unease I had, not that I had much to begin with, was slowly replaced by sheer boredom. Who hired you for this job? I asked, breaking the silence. City Council, she replied. So you're some kind of council agent? Actually, I'm a university student. Saw the flyer on a billboard, the council offered an hour, and I took the job. And how are you handling your sleep schedule? Lisa took a sip of coffee before answering. My lectures start at 1 p.m, so I can sleep until then. Don't worry about me. Alex seemed a practical person. She was. That's what people called her back in high school, Practical Lisa. A grand master of time management. Always arriving on time, leaving on time. Homework and assignments finished early, never rushed, always top grades. The clock read 9:20 p.m. 2 hours and 40 minutes to go. We had already spent an hour and 20 minutes in the cemetery, yet it felt like mere minutes. I leaned back and stared at the tombstone, wondering who was buried there. Then plop. A sound. Something black fell from the sky, hit the stone, and dropped to the ground. I jerked up. Lisa flinched at the noise. Then again. Another black object struck the grave. We both looked down at the entrance of the tomb. 2 blackbirds lay there, Uladi, motionless, dead. I barely had time to process it before another thud sounded. A 3rd bird dropped. 3 dead birds. I froze. My mind scrambled for an explanation. Lisa, silent beside me, was likely thinking the same thing. I crouched down and picked up the corpses. I wasn't sure why, maybe out of respect for the burial ground. As I passed the door of the grave, a wave of nausea hit me. The smell. Lisa noticed my reaction and stepped forward only to gag as well. The door. That particular part of the grave reeked. of rot, of filth, of something foul. Lisa dropped to her knees, retching. Instinct kicked and I grabbed her arm and dragged her away from the doorway. Strangely, the second we stepped back into open air, the smell vanished. You okay? I asked. Just get rid of the birds, she muttered. I did as she asked, dumping the bodies in a trash bin before returning to my seat. I checked the time again. 2 more hours to go. I leaned against a tree, exhaustion creeping up on me. A strange omen, falling asleep in the middle of a graveyard. Not exactly a good sign. But my mind kept drifting back to the blackbirds. Not the Beatles' song, the real ones. The ones that fell from the sky and died. What was that all about? At some point I must have dozed off, though not completely. I could still hear the wind, the ambient night sounds, and Lisa muttering to herself, "What the fuck am I doing?" I opened my eyes and glanced at her. She was looking something up on her phone, probably searching for information on Alice, just as I was about to suggest. I found nothing. Every search result led to people from different places that shared our town's name. The only Alice I came across was Alice Hill, a policewoman from another precinct, definitely not our Alice. In fact, she had just liked a post about a Domino's weekend deal. Yeah, not the Alice we were looking for. Another hour passed. Only 30 minutes left before I could head home. Then thunder rumbled in the distance. As I packed my bag, I noticed something odd. A part of it was tangled in the branches on the ground. That was the logical explanation. But from my perspective, it felt like the ground itself had swallowed my bag strap. Like it was pulling me in. I yanked hard, and when it finally came loose, I stumbled back right as lightning struck the tree I had been resting against. The next thing I knew, I was on the ground, screaming. Embers burned into my back. Pain. Confusion. Lisa's voice cut through the haze. Are you okay? I nodded. I wasn't okay. I needed to leave. Lisa refused. She was getting paid, after all. We argued. In the end, I left her behind. The burn marks from embers in the thunderstorm had washed away by the time I arrived home. One stroke of luck was that I had managed to leave the tree in time. The burn still stung, and with exhaustion and injury weighing on me, I barely made it to my bed before darkness consumed me. In my dreams, I found myself back at the cemetery alone this time, in the morning. I wandered through the graves until I reached the one I had guarded the night before, the one with the door. As I approached from the side where the door was, it slowly creaked open. Emerging from within were 2 figures, Lisa and me, but not as we were. They were rotting, crawling with maggots, resurrected corpses from years past. I jolted awake, gasping for air. What a nightmare. At least I had slept enough to heal physically. Mentally, I wasn't so sure. I dressed, got into my car, and drove to the station. On the way, I checked in with Lisa. She told me she had gone home and then added, "Are you okay?" I am not. That unsettled me. I immediately called her. The moment she answered, I expected her to say something, anything, but there was only silence. No words, no breathing. Just the distant ambience of her home. I messaged her again. No response. I decided to wait until our next visit to the cemetery. At the station, I tried to dig up any information related to the grave Lisa had been assigned to watch. Nothing. So, I focused on my usual work, writing reports. By noon, I was out patrolling the streets. The city was soon drenched in heavy rain, reducing visibility to almost nothing. I had to navigate using only the silhouettes of buildings. Eventually, I sought shelter in a small building, waiting for the downpour to subside. I informed my team that the storm was delaying my return to the station. The rain was so dense that I could barely see a few yards ahead. I decided to push forward despite the conditions. As I moved through the misty streets, a silhouette of a woman appeared in the distance. At first, I thought she was just another pedestrian, but as I got closer, her face remained obscured. No matter how near I got, she remained a dark figure against the fog. Dumbfounded, I questioned whether I was hallucinating or if the mist was so thick that even nearby people became invisible. As I pondered, the fog began to lift, and I turned my gaze back to where she had walked. I froze. I was no longer on the street. I was back at the cemetery, at the same tomb. Alice's tomb. The lightning-struck tree stood there. I was there. I stumbled back, staring at the grave. It looked the same, unchanged, undisturbed date. How had I ended up here? But I had no time to dwell on that. I had a duty to return to my patrol. Checking my watch, I felt a cold wave of unease wash over me. 12:50 p.m. I had been waiting out the rain for what felt like 20 minutes, but nearly an hour had passed. I ran back to the station, my mind racing with questions. How did I end up at the graveyard? When my shift ended at 5, Lisa asked me to meet her at the same cuff across from the cemetery. As I sipped my coffee, I watched mourners entering and leaving the graveyard. Then, I noticed a homeless-looking person enter, and that was the last thing I remembered before Lisa tapped my shoulder. I asked her about the message she had sent earlier, the one where she said she wasn't okay. But she denied ever sending it. In fact, she claimed she never even received my message. I showed her my phone. She showed me hers. The last message between us was from yesterday. She swore she hadn't deleted anything. I checked the number. It was the right one. Either there had been a system glitch or something else was going on. The latter seemed unlikely. Or was it? Night fell, and we entered the cemetery once again, making our way to Alice's grave. Lisa pulled out her phone, searching for any information about Alice. I stared at the grave, then at the door embedded within it. The doorknob was still there. The tomb stood tall and imposing. As I gazed at it, I felt myself growing drowsy. I fought to keep my eyes open, and when I refocused, I saw something. A person approaching from the far end of the cemetery. The woman in white. I stood and told Lisa to stay put as I followed her. She had been lingering here for too long. As soon as she noticed me, she turned and walked away, then quickened her pace. She was running. Instincts kicked in. Either she was planning to spend the night among the graves, or she was hiding something. Either way, she needed to be stopped. But the moment I pursued her, I realized something. She was fast. Inhumanly fast. I lost her. No, it was worse than that. The cemetery was small, yet she had completely disappeared, as if she had never been there at all. Frustrated, I turned back. Lisa was gone. Not in the watching area. No notes. No trace. I called her name, scanning the darkness until I saw it. The door in the grave was open. A pit formed in my stomach. If she had gone inside, I had to follow. A rotten stench flooded out as I stepped forward. Something dead was down there. I descended into the darkness. What I found made me freeze. A vast chamber filled with skeletons, mutilated corpses, bottles of strange, unidentifiable liquids, and in the centre an altar. Lisa lay upon it. Her throat had been slit. I rushed to her in panic, only for something wet to drip onto my face. I looked up. A crimson drop fell onto Lisa's body. Then another, and another. It was raining blood. Inside, with no open ceiling, Lisa's body was drenched in it. So was I. I screamed. I fled. I didn't stop running until I reached my home, collapsing onto the floor. Everything faded to black. I woke to a phone call. My colleague informed me that the grave had been raided and a body was found inside. Lisa's body. I was immediately under suspicion. My role as a policeman was suspended until further investigation. Weeks passed. The case remained unsolved. Lisa's death was not a suicide. At her funeral, she was buried in the same cemetery where she had died. Afterward, I stopped by the cough. As I left, I noticed a plaque on the wall. It read in 1600, the site was a cottage of a witch named Alice. Born in 1570, she lived until 1699 when the townspeople burned her at the stake at the very location of the city cemetery. In 1933, a man named Charles Grover was found dead in the same spot where she perished. As I read, realization struck me that it might have not been the city council that lured Lisa to the grave.